Good morning, Deputy First Minister and Professor Leach, and I'd also like to wish you both a Happy New Year. I've got a few questions regarding the number 10 regulations, and these have been stimulated by constituents who have contacted me over the last few days. The first one is regarding shielding. The regulations are quite clear in terms of who should be shielding, but I've been contacted by a lady who herself, she did shield last year for 12 weeks, and that wasn't because of her, it was because of her husband. Her husband has cystic fibrosis and a range of other health conditions, so she is really concerned that she's been asked to go into work, and she's concerned about taking that back home to put her husband's life in danger. So should that lady shield, or should she be attending work?
I'll perhaps invite Professor Leach to comment on this, but essentially the judgment there, I think, is best, or the best advice I can offer, is for the lady in question to raise these issues directly with her employer, because these are the type of circumstances where we are setting out as a government the type of approach that we believe is necessary to be undertaken, and are encouraging employers to work cooperatively with us in meeting a number of these challenges. So therefore, the question that Mr McMillan puts to me is, I think, one best addressed by the dialogue between the lady and her employer, given the circumstances that she faces as not being an individual who's required by the current arrangements to shield, but for whom it would be beneficial to shield because of the necessity of protecting her husband's health and well-being. But Professor Leach may be able to offer some more insight on this question.
It's very difficult to be definitive, Mr McMillan, on individual cases, but the general advice is, as the Deputy First Minister outlines it, there is higher risk in households of that type, of course, and a conversation both with the healthcare team, probably her husband's healthcare team, and with the employer would be exactly the route to go down. If the employer has choices, for example, I don't know what it is, let's say it's a call centre where some people can work from home and some people have to go in, then this would be the kind of lady I would hope that that workplace would be sympathetic to and allow her to work from home as much as can. If she has to go to work, it's not necessarily unsafe if everything is mitigated. So if she washes her hands, if she stays distant, if she can do all of that, I understand the anxiety of that, but that would be the advice. If she is a paramedic and has to be on the road, then that's an entirely different set of circumstances compared to others where there might be a little bit more flexibility. And I'm quite sure that family have developed a way of keeping themselves safe in and around their house, in and around those relationships. So it's not a unique story. So a conversation with the workplace and a conversation perhaps with her husband's care team may help unlock perhaps some flexibility.
Yeah, no, thank you very much for that. The second question, just regarding travel and work. If somebody has to travel for work, particularly if they have to go overseas, will they be provided with any type of documentary proof that they have received the vaccination? This might be more important for people who potentially work in the oil and gas sector, who do travel across the world.
I'll invite Professor Leach to respond to that question.
So not yet, no vaccine certification yet. I mean, the people will have evidence they've been vaccinated because they'll have letters or they'll have their appointment. But the problem just now is we don't know what vaccination means other than personal protection. We know it personally protects you up to a certain level. What we don't know is if it makes you safer on an oil rig, because we don't know about transmission yet. So that will come, Mr McMillan. I'm confident a version of that will come once we know about transmission. And then the world will take a view on vaccine certification and what that means. And I wouldn't be at all surprised if that starts with high-risk industry, health and social care workers, nuclear power, oil and gas, and then works its way through society. But for now, we're unfortunately telling even the vaccinated not to change their behaviour.
Well, Okay. Thank you for that. Next question just is regarding the first aid training, and I was contacted by a representative from St Andrews First Aid. They're just wondering as to whether guidance will be updated regarding first aid training in the workplace, because they're aware that there's another couple of organisations that are going to be doing the training, but there's just seems to be a lack of clarity as to whether that should or should not be taking place over the course of the new measures that are being introduced.
So, Deputy First Minister, I can take this because I dealt with it yesterday. I can't actually remember the detail, Mr McMillan, of who is writing. It may be me, it may be the Cabinet Secretary for Health. I can't remember if I approved a letter in my own name or approved a letter on behalf of the Cabinet Secretary to send to her, for her then to send. But we did have correspondence from the organisations, the first aid organisations, and it was about the statutory nature of some first aid training for workplaces that had been stopped, for instance, in a factory that has to have it to function. And my advice was that much of that should be done online as much as it can be, but if that needs to be face-to-face, then that is a legitimate reason for that workplace to have some face-to-face training for essential staff only, and that seemed a very sensible and pragmatic way forward. The organisations were looking for that kind of guidance, and we are doing that. If it hasn't already been done today, it's imminent.
That's helpful, thank you very much. My final question on this is regarding free school meals. Obviously, there was prior to the December, there was the over £100 million winter fund that was created, but that clearly wouldn't have taken into consideration the measures that we're discussing now. So, will pupils who are in receipt of free school meals, will they have any additional funding over this period to assist them with eating? Yeah.
Well, the existing arrangements, what we put in place was free school meal provision for essentially the holiday periods, and that was additional provision that we'd put in place. Obviously, we're in term time just now, which is fully funded for free school meals. So the schools will be making arrangements through local authorities for essentially the provision of free school meals to those who are eligible, and that will be done either by in a variety of fashions. Obviously, young people who are in school will be fed, those who are at home. It is largely now cash payments that are made to families, or in some cases it's voucher arrangements, but it tends to be gravitating towards cash payments, and that will be assured for families in this context.
Okay, well, thank you. And my final question is just regarding the access to waste recycling facilities. I'm conscious that, as you said this morning, Deputy First Minister, the need to reduce human interaction. And I know there are concerns with people who work in these facilities. I know on Monday, as I was driving through to Parliament for the recall, I went and dropped some stuff off, and one of the guys who was working there did actually raise the question with me. He'd indicated as to how busy it had been for the couple of days beforehand. Over 5,000 cars had been in, and it's a fairly small area. So they certainly were concerned in terms of the human interaction going into their facility in Greenock, but also this will be across the country, of course. So has there been any consideration given to the waste recycling facilities as to whether they should or should not remain open over this period, please?
This is one of the issues that I think I would put into the category of having the potential to be changed if we are not satisfied that the degree of human interaction is not reducing sufficiently within the country. Mr McMillan will be familiar with the fact that there was a lot of difficulty with fly tipping as a consequence of the waste recycling facilities not being open. Now, I'm not using that as a defence of fly tipping. Fly tipping is wholly unacceptable, but around about the time when the waste recycling centres were closed, there was an upsurge in fly tipping, and nobody wants to see that. But equally, the gentleman that spoke to Mr McMillan, who works in the waste recycling centre, has got a fair point that if there's 5,000 cars being at that recycling centre in Greenock, then we just need to multiply that around waste recycling centres around the country. So I think these facilities are still able to operate, but clearly, if we do not see a reduction in the level of interaction within society, then we may have to reconsider that position. And I come back to the fundamental point that the law now says that people cannot leave home without a reasonable excuse. Now, I'm not sure quite why one would need to go to a waste recycling centre to leave home for that purpose in the current context, unless I think you really have to stretch the definition of reasonable excuse to justify making that journey. So I think the getting people to follow faithfully the stay-at-home regulations and not to leave without reasonable excuse is, I think, a central part of making sure that the circumstances that Mr McMillan narrates to me are not the circumstances that continue at waste recycling centres in the future.